y'all was going that way, they were going this way. If this shit, hey, we gonna get this shit on camera, it's got to be right. Yeah. Let's go, y'all ready? Let's go, Pete. We going that way first. There you go. Everybody know this guy, man. LP, stand up guy. Make some noise, make some noise. I met LP when I first started DJing. I DJed when it was your son and your daughter birthday. Your daughter, sweet 16 party. Since then, he said, you got it. And he been rocking with me ever since. And I'm grateful for that. I started this movement, this DJ crew called Humble Hustle DJs. And I asked my big brother to be my vice president. And he said, you go on down. So, I don't have no chain for you, but I do have this. The Humble Hustle official t-shirt for DJ LP. So, it's official. We got in. More big events, more things, more fly sauce and teas. Y'all get ready. So, I hope y'all had a good night. You had fun? Yeah. I had fun too. Even though your dreads I got so long in 3 years, bro. I'm just saying. All right, play that last track, bro.
This is LoveReigns, and we are back for another episode of the Random Thoughts of Rain podcast live. And today, man, I'm truly excited about this conversation today. Today we are talking about all kinds of stuff. We're going to try our best to keep it within the time constraints. But we're talking about Juneteenth in Jacksonville. We're talking about gaslighting and the government. and being black and living in Jacksonville. So that's what we're gonna talk about today. So once again, my name is Taryn LoveReigns Warwood, and shouts out to the whole MPN network. I hope y'all tuned in to the previous shows, and make sure y'all tune in to all of the podcasts that happens. And every last Thursday we do the MPN live. So MPN Network Night Live. So tonight I am truly honored, and I'm really I'm a little intimidated by my guests tonight because they are all of them together. Who would have thunk it, right? So to my left, we have the one and only Miss Adana Katola. And we're going to go around and I'm going to let everybody do about 30 seconds of intro. 30 seconds. I'm not going to put the timer on. 30 seconds.
You better.
So we've got Miss Adana Katola, we've got Mr. Jerry Ursel, and we have the professor himself, the one and only Mr. Chris White. So, Miss Adana Katola.
So hello everyone, my name is Adana Katola. I am the museum administrator at the Ritz Theater Museum, and I am a historian by trade, and I'm pleased to be here this evening. And LoveReigns and I have been working a lot together, so you'll be seeing more of me in partnership with Miss LoveReigns. So I look forward to sharing with you.
And I'm Jerry Urso. I'm a Jacksonville historian. I am currently the Grand Historian for the Most Worshipful Union Grand Lodge. I'm a member of the Cairo Fraternity, PHA, and I'm currently a fellow for the Philaxis Society.
My name is Christopher White. I am a middle school social studies teacher, as well as a musician in a local band called the Cats Downstairs here in Jacksonville.
Boom, boom, boom. And I meant to say, so tonight's show is sponsored by Uncut Drip. Make sure you get this shirt. Make sure you check it out. Chris Pratcher. Boom, boom. Unsilenced. So make sure y'all check out the Uncut Drip and hit them up for your unsilenced tees and some other amazing t-shirts that he's doing. He's doing a whole clothing line. He also has a book that he just dropped, so y'all make sure y'all hit him up. So shouts out to Chris, and thank you for being a sponsor tonight. So let's get right into this conversation. Whew. All right, so let's start with, I think, there's a couple things that have happened this year where, things would happen and, black folks collectively was just all right. What? The first thing was the insurrection, right? I think when the insurrection first happened, almost every black person I know was just we tried to tell y'all, I don't know what to tell y'all, right? Okay, then fast forward. Juneteenth is declared a federal holiday. I don't want it to, want to make it seem like, I can't speak for everybody. I don't want to make it seem like I wasn't excited, right? Because there's, a lot of people who have been fighting for years to get it to become a federal holiday. However, it's a federal holiday, but in states like Florida, we have a governor who doesn't want us to teach about the actual history of it. So to me, that's extreme gaslighting, right? When it comes to, we just gonna do this a little bit to shut the black folks up, to appease the black folks for a little bit, so we can say, so y'all can say, we gave y'all a federal holiday, but now what, right? So how did y'all feel about the whole federal holiday, Juneteenth becoming a federal holiday?
Well, I was surprised at how quickly it passed without much controversy. Mm-hmm. So knowing American history and politics, then there really wasn't a powerful move for us. Because anytime we are advocating for a law or something that really will benefit us as a people, really protect us as a people, or really ensure our rights as citizens of this country, there's always a major pushback, controversy, fight for it. So when something passes that's supposed to be good on our behalf, it passes so easily, then there really isn't any real power being excluded toward us. And also, many people were celebrating Juneteenth without that. They don't need the federal holiday for that. And there's a misconception that Juneteenth, that was now all slaves were free in the United States when Juneteenth happened, and that is incorrect.
Right.
And so,
And we're gonna get into that.
and we're gonna get into that.
We're gonna
So-
break it down. Yeah.
So, one, we didn't need that to celebrate the holiday, and it really did not do anything substantial for us as a people in this country.
How about you, sir?
I have the total opposite, and I'm going to tell you why. I think it's a great accomplishment for all those people to work so hard. And let's get the record straight. The Declaration of Independence wasn't signed on July 4th either. So the Declaration wasn't completely signed until August 2nd, but we celebrate that. So I think the whole part with Juneteenth was it was the one that gained the most momentum. It was the most celebrated. So you can't pick the 48 dates whenever the states ratified the 13th Amendment. So having said that, at the same time they're denouncing critical race theory, they're denouncing the 1619 Project. How do you not teach a federal holiday and tell the truth behind that holiday? So Frederick Douglass, in my opinion, always used the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and turned people on its heads with it. He was an extremely well versed law scholar, in my opinion. So if you ever read The Art of War, you always use what the enemy gives you to turn it on your enemy. So I think that now with the fact that they denounce critical race theory, they're denouncing the 1619 Project, now we have something that we can teach. You can't say you can't teach it because it's there. It's a federal holiday, so how do you not explain it? So that's my take on it.
So, I have a very weird. It's gonna be weird to some people. I'm on both of you guys' side, definitely.
Well,
and the reason I say that, mine is like,
yeah.
and I guess I always see things like as a duality. I'm kind of like a universal type viewer of life itself. There's a duality. There's a yin and yang. There's a dark. There's a light. So while I'm happy about it, I'm happy about that.
Correct.
Juneteenth even existing.
Right.
I'm happy about it. I'm happy about the Emancipation Proclamation. I'm happy about all these things. Civil rights movement. I'm happy about all of that. But at some point, I want us to look back in history and as black people stop waiting for permission from white people. We still, it wasn't like the Maroons in Jamaica. It wasn't like we cut off all oppressors' head and put their heads on pikes.
Right.
And they turned around. It was like, hey, y'all free now. We decided because the rest of the world is looking at us because we're antiquated. We're still doing slavery. The country is headed in a different direction economically. We want to combine the company. The company. Freudian slip.
Right.
We want to combine the company. And so we want to go in a different direction. Slavery doesn't work for us anymore. So it wasn't like European Americans were being benevolent. It suited them better.
Right.
So they said, we give you permission to be free now.
Right.
Okay, you guys want to march for Martin Luther King. We give you permission to sit at our tables. We give you permission to come in the front door instead of the back door.
Right.
And so while I celebrate these accomplishments, at some point, I want to be feared and respected. Now, I'm not saying go out and do a whole bunch of heinous crimes. I'm not saying that. But at some point, if you keep waiting for permission, if you keep waiting for them to say it's okay for you to do, at some point, there needs to be I'm not waiting on you to give me something. We're going to build something over here. We don't really need to be with you to feel like we're complete.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm waiting to awaken in my people. I'm waiting on us to not have to go to them for everything. I wait for permission and everything to join in with them.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for us to create our own more.
I have a
So we
point
don't
for
have to
that
do
too.
that.
So I get what you're saying, but there was Tulsa, and there was Ocoee, and there was Rosewood,
Yeah.
there was Jacksonville.
Mhm.
If you don't know, after the Civil War, by 1926, there were 600 black-owned businesses in Jacksonville, Florida.
Mhm.
So just like you were saying, Tulsa, those blacks in Tulsa went and did that. They had a whole community. They were self-contained. They were living their life. Fine clothes, fine houses, 3 banks, high schools. They were self-contained, doing their thing. And so it's not that we wait for permission for that. It's when we take the steps and we are successful at it. The same old excuse of the black man fooling around with a white woman was the excuse used to destroy that economic power.
Mm-hmm.
So part of that is, it's not that we're not stepping out and doing things for ourselves. It's when we're successful and it's evident that we don't need you to be a success. You're now intimidated. So instead of just leaving us alone and minding your business, now you get an excuse so you come in and attack. And you always attack our economic power.
But I think that goes along with what you were saying about the fear and the respect.
The fear and the respect, because what number one, if we settle on that, because I definitely agree. Whenever you talk about that, and whenever I'm in a room and we're talking about that, I'm like, you know what's coming next. Once you get that economic power, you don't need them. But at the same time, then that means we're never really free.
Right.
So we might as well just settle, unless we're gonna, because every think about 400 years of 400 years of being of slavery in this country, and it was more than that. But just think about that. You woke up, you died a slave every day, and then think about those that went through this Jim Crow. So you woke up and died. So there's things that we're gonna have to keep trying until it comes into fruition.
Right.
And the thing about our generation, and when I say our generation, I'm talking about those that are in the late 30s and above, we forget that we're the new school elders. We're supposed to be leading the way. It's not really about us. We're building something for future generations. So it's almost like, yeah, there's a fear of doing that, but if we don't keep doing it, it's not going to come into fruition, and we're just going to never really be free. We're never really, because we're scared to be free. Well, what's going to happen? I'm sorry.
My issue is always the black history that's taught almost paints black people as lemmings in America, and there's nothing further from the truth. I'll go as quickly as I can. In Boston, the free slaves, the free blacks in Boston called themselves the Sons of Africa. They were writing petitions to the colonial court for the Emancipation Proclamation to come. This is the 1770s. They were petitioning to have their own schools. They built their own schools, but nobody talks about that. Everybody talks about Dred Scott, how he was denied that he was a human being, but nobody talks about Kawak Walker or Elizabeth Freeman, right? Who both gained, not only did they gain their freedom, Kawak Walker actually got retribution for being hit by his master, right? Not only did he get his freedom, he got paid. And this is in the 1780s, right? There's an African man. It's hard to tell. It's probably Kawake, but we don't teach that history. We teach that Harriet Tubman freed about 76 slaves, but nobody talks about Moses Dixon, who had an army of 25,000, right? So he led one of the largest exoduses in American history when they liberated 16,000 slaves and brought them to Missouri. Moses Dixon had an army. If he would have made it to help John Brown, the Civil War would have started 10 years before it did. Nobody talks about a man that had an army of 25,000 men. We teach this history, but we don't tell the whole story. And that's one of the things that angers me when I look at history. And then they also don't talk about the division of the races as a social construct. W.E.B. Du Bois says it all the time. Race is a social, not a biological construct. So what do they do in America? Since Bacon's revolt in 1640, they made it a crime to marry cross racial lines, right? So if you were white and you married a black man, or vice versa, or you married a black woman, you became a slave. So they made it a political and a sociological statement that it was now that you will become yourself a slave. How did they get the Irish indentured servants and because slavery in 1692 wasn't the same as it was in 1865. It wasn't chattel slavery. It had to work its way up. It had to work its way from almost indentured servitude to chattel slavery, right? So what did they do? The first law they had was to keep black people from having arms. It was a crime for an African or a person of African descent to own a gun in Virginia and Maryland. So they made it a crime to cross racial lines. They're telling Irish people that, what's that quote by Lyndon Johnson? He says, if you can convince the lowest white man that he's better than a black man, you can pick his pocket. And that's what's going on today. This whole white rage is all based on a concept that's been in this country since 1640. 1640. Race never existed. Show me the word white anywhere in human history before 1640 in Maryland and Virginia. It doesn't exist. It's a social construct so they could get money through tobacco, the new gold. And they created people created empires off the tobacco trade. And that's how this whole system started. But we don't talk about all these African Americans who have accomplished so many great things. Tillman Valentine, when he came to Jacksonville, the first thing, one of the Peckerwoods called him the N-word when he got off the train with the 39th States Code Infantry. They shot the dude's ear off. They were making a statement as soon as they got to Jacksonville, we're here. They were liberating Thomas Long when he came back from the Battle of the Lusty. He was an escaped slave that used to be on the Roberts Plantation on Beaver Street. Walked on foot 30 miles into darkness to Yulee to join the 33rd. At the time, it was called the 1st South Carolina Volunteers. So when he comes back from the Battle of the Lusty, the first thing he does with his military issue rifles, go to the Roberts Plantation and liberates his wife and children at gunpoint. But we don't teach that history.
So it's interesting that you brought that up, right? So one of the things that I always like to, especially when it comes to education, one thing that I'm really happy about and proud of in terms of my own education was when I was growing up, I went to a private school that was run by 2 amazing black women. It was a small school. It was about 30 black kids. And they taught us about history. They taught us about our real history, right? They taught us about being kings and queens. And we almost never talked about slavery because they wanted us to know who we really were, right? They taught us, poetry and quotes and all of these different things, the things that they don't teach kids today. So from an educational perspective, right? When you're in the classroom, just like Adonica was saying with the young boy that when we did the event last Saturday, so Adonica gave the history and well, you go ahead and tell us.
Oh yeah, so I did a Reigns and I did an event for a startup grind for our friend Teresa, and I was Teresa told me later that one of the women that was also part of the program was in the car with her son while I was talking, and she was driving to and I was I'm not sure what it was I said, but I'm sure I was being very proud, talking very proudly about our history. And she said in the middle of that, her son went, "Mama, we weren't just slaves. We were more than slaves." And she said her son just like lit up. It was like, "Ooh, we weren't just slaves." And it was like he kept saying it over and over, and it just was like he was so relieved that we were more than slaves. And so the thing about what you're saying about teaching it, the other problem we have is people think history is boring, or you're only going to hear about slavery. You're only going to hear about the negative, and what you do hear, and what you hear about Malcolm X and what you hear about Dr. King and the civil rights movement, it's sanitized now. It's very sanitized. And so I have a dream, and that's all we think about Martin Luther King. But you don't, he wasn't assassinated because he was talking about a high pie in the sky. Right. He started dealing with their money.
That poor people's.
He started dealing with their money and
unions.
telling them, and you start talking about we shouldn't be in Vietnam, and you need to be these people need to be having some money, and they need some good housing, and they need good jobs. When he got to that point, oh yeah, they said it's time. It's time. He gotta go.
Yeah. So, but to that point though, right? So in the classroom, right? With you being in the classroom currently, and you being such a universal thinker, and so Juneteenth has passed, but then they don't want teachers to teach critical race theory. How do you combat that in the classroom when it comes to actually teaching the real history?
I'm gonna be me. I'm gonna be the same teacher I was before. Because at the end of the day, when you build relationships with your tribe, and when I say your tribe, your administration, the teachers around you, I'm at the only school black people could go to at one point, and it's still 99.9% black. Gilbert, Matthew Gilbert Middle School. We have kids that my principal is like, give them everything, all the tools, because when they come, they're empty. So these kids aren't gonna go home and say, you know, Mr. White said we're greater than slaves. Mr. White taught about the Mali tribe, and you know, Mr. White taught about how my ancestors could see distant planets before telescopes was created. They're gonna be like, that empowers me. So nobody's gonna run and tell that I'm talking about the America we live in. It's almost like their parents are like, thank you.
Yeah.
I didn't know all of this. Thank you.
Right.
My son told me you told him about this. Thank you. So I'm in a school that appreciates it. So it's not like somebody sound the alarm, this man telling us the truth about black people. It's almost like, thank you.
Right.
So I'm in a safe space.
Yeah.
You know, I'm in a safe space, and we don't have to worry about that where
Yeah.
I am, because our kids need all the tools we can give them. They need math, reading, their history. They need all the tools. So I'm safe.
Well, the thing is, all the kids need.
Yeah, and
the
that's what I'm
tools.
saying. Yeah, they
Because-
how do we
because
get it?
Just
I thought
because
you were saying my
No. I say
Well, yeah.
your
But
experience,
what I'm
it's like,
saying,
how do
all-
we get it?
and not all,
beyond that.
and not just all the kids. Some of the adults need to know
Oh,
too.
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's like
Oh, yeah.
that
Yeah.
is. I did a tour. I've been doing tours the last few days, and the astonishment for the adults as well as the children, and these are the teachers. This is not just you know. You're one of the few teachers in the school system. And when I say something, your jaw doesn't drop because you heard that. You heard it. I'm talking about teachers who've been in the system 10, 15, 20 years, and I say something, and you live here, and your mouth drops. And
What?
I'm like,
Listen to the term you just said. They've been in the what?
system.
Whose system is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then you have, but like you say, we're the ones that say, you say, I'm gonna do me. I'm gonna do what I know I need to do.
They're out there. They just kind of.
Well,
You know,
but I'm
They
gonna tell
tiptoe.
you,
They put their
they
head lower,
tiptoe,
yeah, they
but it's
tiptoe.
still too
Yeah.
many
Yeah.
that don't know. It's too many of them that's astonished.
So, let me say this. Even European history is tainted. The way it's
Absolutely,
taught.
everything, absolutely.
Okay, so we have a system that has, so we break the world up into the 4 basic food groups, right? African, European, Asian, and Hispanic, right? I mean, that's how we look at that's the world view that we are forced to look at, right?
Correct.
Is there any connection between the Nordic people and the people of Turkey and Greece? They do not look the same. Their culture is completely different. They are biologically different. They speak a different language. They cook different foods and all that. But we lump it and we call it European, right? Like we've had this conversation. I don't like the word African, European, Asian, and Hispanic because you rob ethnic people of their culture by linking them all together. Africa is over 200 countries, 2,000 individual linguistic languages, and we lump all these people into one and make it a monolithic thing when you have people like the Berber empires and the Ethiopian empires were far bigger than Egypt. But the only thing we teach about Africa in America is really Egypt. We don't talk about the lost city of Tunisia where they were using the same buildings in the during the 11 to 1200 AD when the stone builders were building all those cathedrals in Europe. The same structures were being built in Tunisia.
The Dogon tribe.
Dogon tribe, yeah.
Right.
The
So
Dogon tribe.
we
But
weren't.
they don't even talk about. But even
And there was
even
trade,
Egypt,
but
yeah.
there was trade going on between. Listen, the world, ancient world was
Come on, man.
the Western,
Yes,
the
yes.
Western Asia,
Yes.
Southern Europe, and North Africa was the superhighway where the
Yes.
Nile River goes up and it dumps into what?
Right.
The Mediterranean. The people in Greece eat the same food as the people in in
Morocco,
Algeria, Morocco,
Yep.
and Egypt.
They
The
should.
same fish exists on both sides of the border. They don't go, wait a minute, there's only one kind of fish, so we're only going to eat that. And you know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
you have grape leaves in North Africa and in Southern Europe. I mean,
Yeah.
people have to eat this, like
They
the
eat the same
Mediterranean
things,
food
right.
Africa is part of the Mediterranean Sea. And there was always been trade. It's a potpourri of people. The Egyptian pharaohs were marrying their children off to make peace with other nations, like with the Hittites and the Canaanites. This was going on. So like, we don't want to teach that history. We have to teach separation. America is founded on the separation of the races. And then the one thing you can do, even the Irish and Scots aren't white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. And they're right next to each other. Right? So we have this history that we make everybody white. So the same people that when they came over as immigrants, and like the two biggest ethnic groups from Europe that came over here that were maligned were the Irish and the Italians, right? No Italian need, first it was no Irish need to apply, then it was no Italian need to apply. They were lynching Italians throughout the whole South, the ones from Sicily. They called them Dagos. That was the term that they used. Right. The first lynching of a Sicilian was Diego Joe in Alabama because he was so dark. The largest mass lynching in American history took place in Crescent, Louisiana, where they tried to lynch 22 Sicilians because people hated them. They were thieves, murderers, and all these other terms. Now I look at Italian people, and you want to raid the Capitol and call yourself white, and I'm like, these are the same people that didn't like you, like your 100 years ago, they were maligning your grandparents. Right. Now you're going to align yourself with the same people that set up a system to divide you, and it makes no sense to me.
And it doesn't, and it doesn't make sense. So how do we? Okay, right. So how do? One thing that I love is that we've opened up the door, like the gates are open when it comes to conversation. You know, the time for sweeping stuff under the rug, all of that's out the window. Like that is gone, right? So the more we have conversation, right, it's good. But now what else can we do? How can we take that history, right? How do we spread that outside of the classroom? How do we get it in the community? How do we do beyond the museum tours? Because we got to get them there because they're not coming to the museum, right? So how do we take that knowledge and how do we teach the real history? Where do we start?
You got to start having discourse and not having debate. Like the whole world is on catchphrases. If you go on YouTube, right, they always use a catchphrase. So the clickbait, right? Someone schooled this guy. Anytime they have people with opposing views, someone had to have gotten schooled, right? And there's no dialogue. There's no going back and forth. Listen. There are over 1 billion cells in the human body. One strand of DNA, determines the amount of melanin in your skin, right? So I have 1 billion things in common with you, but we're going to spend so much time on one gene in the human body that determines complexion, and we're going to divide people based on that. It makes no biological sense whatsoever. There's no such thing as race. You're human. The race of mankind is the human race. And then we have ethnic cultures. But we so busy putting people into the 4 basic food groups and making people good versus evil. I mean, that's really what it is. That's what we teach in school, right? I mean, like, up until recently, when you watch any movie, who's always the bad guy?
It's always the brown people.
Right? Dragnet, all them shows, all the cop shows back in the day, right? And so you've had 50 years of white fear. Since the invention of television, you've created white fear, right? So if you've never spoke to someone or someone doesn't look like you and you've never had a discourse with them, your only interpretation is through movies and television. And we create fear based on that. Nobody talks about like all the abolitionists that were tarred and feathered. White people were tarred and feathered because they believed in the abolition of slavery. They had to paint John Brown as crazy because W.E.B. Du Bois, Malcolm X, and Frederick Douglass all said he was the greatest, not black American, not white American. All three of them said the same thing. He's the greatest American to ever live. But teaching in school, he's a crazy lunatic. Because why? He was staunch against slavery. And risked his family for that. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. We don't talk about Whittier. We don't John Greenleaf Whittier. We don't talk about William Lloyd Garrison.
But I don't think enough people know about it because, like, a lot of stuff I learned growing up because my parents were educators. I learned growing up and because they surrounded me. There's a lot of people that don't know where to start.
Right.
You know what I'm
And-
saying?
right,
And I think
right.
that comes back to,
And-
as I said, with the new school elders, it comes to,
Right.
I talk
It's
to
on
kids
us,
that just
yeah.
be on the block. I be
Yeah.
like, what's going on, man? I want you to be safe out here. I want you to understand where you
Right.
are. I want you to understand that they're looking for you to do something wrong. I want you to be smart.
I say that every day.
But I'm just saying,
Yeah.
building relationships
But-
like that. Then I can give you some deeper stuff.
Yeah.
But
And it also goes into the perception that you have about history and Black history. And just like what he said, we had it barned off. And if you're going to talk about Black history, I mean, one of the things that the response is to when people come in the museum and people say it's black and white, and they'll go, "Oh, it's beautiful." It's like, "Oh, you ain't talking about slavery in here?" I do on the side, but when you walk in, you're gonna see James Weldon Johnson's and John Wilson Johnson's songbook. You're gonna see the harp that Augusta Savage created. You're gonna see
there's so much more.
it's so much more to us. You're gonna see Daniel Webster Perkins' law books and bookcases that he used to, as early as 1912, blacks in Florida could serve on juries because of Daniel Webster
It's
Perkins.
absolutely.
And there's black masons because of Daniel Webster Perkins, because the white masons didn't want the black masons to use the name, the shrine, the
Or the
word
regalia.
shrine, the regalia, and
After
Perkins.
they stole the knowledge from,
After
after they stole the
right,
Kemet,
right,
after they
right.
stole,
After they stole it, and then and I
Kemetic
think and I
knowledge,
learned
and then you stole.
and I learned this from.
So
and
we
I
gotta
learned-
have the discourse.
You
right?
gotta have
we
the
gotta have the
discourse.
discourse. But we
Man.
also here's the other thing too though that I want to say this to black people. Black people have to be willing. There's a lot of black people who are just okay with being ignorant, and I'm not saying ignorant in a negative way as far as like name calling. I'm saying ignorant as far as not knowing and not wanting to know.
They don't want to read.
Like I love knowing stuff.
Yeah.
I love learning, and like you said, it starts at home. That was my foundation growing up in a school like that, and then it was reinforced at home.
Right.
Even to this day, my mom, we share history facts all the time with each other.
We spent a year. It took a whole year to put that exhibit together.
We did black masonry.
I had educators from Edward Waters College, Jacksonville University, University of North Florida, all came to the exhibit. FAMU.
They came.
And most people only knew 10 to 15 people we had
If
on
they
that
knew
wall.
that.
Wow.
Okay, I had 150 people on that wall.
Yeah,
I-
and that
I-
was,
she-
and
that
it wasn't
exhibit
everybody,
was
and it was, and
amazing.
it
she
wasn't
had to stop
everybody.
me. She had to like, Jerry, enough.
We had to stop because we had no room.
Right.
Wow.
We
So I
didn't have
had
enough room.
amazing, man.
So just think, we had 150 on the wall, and that wasn't everybody.
And
Wow.
they were just
And
as
this was,
significant.
and this was out of slavery
Right.
up until. Because we
Jim
didn't even Jim Crow. We didn't even go past Jim Crow. We're talking about 150 people, and we didn't have enough room on the walls for the other. It was here at 70 more,
Yeah.
and
So,
we just didn't have room.
and
That's
what was
why.
amazing was they were just as significant as James Weldon
Exactly.
Johnson. And it's like Black History in America Month. It's always Frederick Douglass,
Yep.
Thurgood
Right.
Marshall,
Right.
Harriet Tubman,
Right.
and then like we cut it off. Maybe if you really have
Rosa
some
Parks.
savoir faire about you, you're gonna throw in Benjamin Banneker, right?
Right.
And then, and
Garrett
just,
Morgan.
Right.
Garrett
But
Morgan,
there's so
right,
many.
right.
But there's
So
hundreds.
many.
There was
Thousands.
over 1,000. Cantor Brown is one of my favorite historians, right?
Yeah,
From FAMU. He started at about 750 black politicians during Reconstruction, and since then we've added probably another 50, and we both agree that the number's probably closer to 1,000. And Jacksonville didn't fall from the Great Compromise of 1877. We had a black mayor in Fernandina in 1914. You had Judge Stays as of 1912 and 1914 in Nassau County. You had Judge Lee, who was the political power for 47 from 1873 to 1920 when he died. Nothing took place in the state of Florida Republican Party without the blessing of Joseph E. Lee. Little story about him. When he became a judge, he was the first African American to win a municipal court seat in the South.
in the South.
In the South. So then they tried to say he was 500 feet out because he lived in Mandarin at the time. So they said, well, you live outside the boundary. This dude gets a bunch of big logs, puts them under his house, gets a bunch of horses and mules, and drags his house 500 feet
Wow.
and says, "How do you like me now?" But see, that's the history we don't
Right.
teach.
Yeah.
We don't teach that Josiah Wiles was the first African American from Florida to sit in the United States House of Representatives, and before he was that, he was a general of the Florida militia. His name was General Wiles. He was liberating plantations throughout Florida.
So let me ask this. Let me ask you this, because we're talking about a way to disseminate this information. Have you thought about writing?
I do.
He writes all the time.
So,
yeah.
but I'm saying, and something that you could, like something that is specifically dedicated. Like, let's just say, black politicians in Jacksonville.
There's some
There-
books.
I
There,
did,
there
well,
are
my
some.
entire exhibit was dedicated to that.
But what I'm
and
saying,
I've been
hear what I'm saying though. I'm saying as an educator.
Yeah.
As an educator, this is how we get the information out, because you are a wealth of knowledge, but to have literature, organized literature that can be passed around and taught and shared. And
Yeah, I'll get you some
So-
links on some of
Yeah.
the books that I've been
So-
published in.
yeah, definitely.
So,
definitely, man.
Yeah,
one of the
and,
things
and
that
some
we-
and books that are already done,
Right.
like
We
Cantor
need that.
Brown.
Right, Cantor
Yeah.
Brown.
And also,
Florida's
this
Black
is where
Public
you.
Officials, the history of the AME Church. They like.
I would
they're
love
well-
that
And
stuff.
the-
I would be
But
teaching
this
that in
is
class.
well, see
Yeah.
but this is where you come in to take what he knows and I know and make it fit the standards.
Yeah.
Because that could be the excuse
Yeah.
that you can't.
It doesn't fit.
But
You gotta
it
have
doesn't
the
fit.
standards, yeah.
So the standards. So
Yeah.
I often tell teachers what's the standard. So as I'm giving the tour, I'm teaching it to them in the standard that you
Mhm.
meet. We do have a traveling trunk tour that goes into the school systems
Mhm.
about James Weldon Johnson and John Rosamond and their impact and Jacksonville's impact
Mhm.
on the Harlem Renaissance.
Mhm.
And it's to standards. And one of the reasons it's easily accepted by principals is
Doing that this
it's
year.
the standards.
Yeah.
So
I would love
yeah.
to find a way to incorporate the arts into that too.
it is.
But I mean, like,
No.
I'm talking about like underground, like right, like in the way I'm thinking, and he knows how I think.
Mm.
I'm talking about bring this to an open mic. you
Yeah,
know what
we
I'm
could
saying?
do that.
Like
Have
bring
you ever
this.
read
Yeah,
Zora
we have a
Neale Hurston?
conversation
We could do
to
that.
in an open mic. We do the cards.
Well, let's talk
or
about
something.
it.
You know
Well,
what I
let's
mean?
talk
Like,
about it because
I want we have to get to a point where we as a whole we got to stop making excuses.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Especially here in Jacksonville, there's no reason. I asked somebody the other day, even as widely known as James Weldon Johnson is, there's people here that don't even know who James.
They
People
don't
that's
know.
older than me.
Well-
that's been here and they still don't know who James Weldon.
The opening statement was written by a black man in 1868.
No,
a former
So
slave.
a former
former
slave,
slave.
within 3 years of emancipation,
Wow.
He was writing the.
he wrote the preamble to the Florida State Constitution. Okay,
Wow.
which is just as beautiful as the preamble to the
And his
American
handwriting was
Constitution.
beautiful.
Yeah, his
His
name was Robert
handwriting-
Meacham.
Robert.
Wow.
And nobody knows who he is. And what we have to do, like when I did that exhibit, so I got to introduce 130 people that nobody ever heard of, right? And I said, the next project I want to do is I want to teach the abolitionists. And so what I want to do is I want to take this black history and show it to white kids too. Like
Right.
these people just weren't slaves. These people were. This is who they were,
And
right?
this is
I want to
history.
take. I
And
want to
it's
keep
history,
the
right.
black.
Well, see-
I want to keep the blackness in history, but take the word black out of it. And I'll
Make-
tell you
make it
why.
history.
Because we're making it history,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Now, how many black people know that white people were tarred and feathered for fighting for their right to freedom? How many people know that probably one of the best surgeons during the Civil War volunteered to work, to be the surgeon of the 1st South Carolina Volunteers? His name is Seth Rogers, Harvard graduate surgeon, right? He could have did any outpost he wanted, joined every unit he wanted. He wanted to join the 1st South Carolina Volunteers because they were made up of runaway slaves. The commanding officer, a lot of the black hymns and Negro spirituals that are recorded were recorded by a white colonel during the Civil War who recorded everything his soldiers said. And he wrote a book called Army Life in the Black Regiment. And he has all these spirituals and all these prayers that these guys, I mean, Harriet Tubman served in that unit with the 1st
Yeah.
South Carolina Volunteers. Susie King Taylor served, right? She's teaching these guys how to write.
Yeah.
And then these guys become Thomas Long.
Politicians.
Thomas
Wow.
Long goes from being a slave, worked his way up to sergeant when they changed the name 1st South Carolina Volunteers to the 33rd United States Colored Infantry. When they were coming back, the wounded white soldiers from the Battle of Olustee, black soldiers took a train and pulled it with rope back to Jacksonville to save these guys' lives, right? The biggest battle of the Confederacy, the Civil War, even though the Confederacy won that battle, Sergeant Long went on a suicide mission to burn down the bridge so they couldn't bring the cannons over because they would have probably been completely wiped out. Then the guy becomes a representative, a senator, and he starts Masonic lodges. I think he's responsible for founding 11 AME churches. I mean, this guy was John Wayne.
Yeah.
Right, he went everywhere on foot
But he
or
killed
by.
people like the bed.
Right, but he went everywhere
He
on
killed the
foot or by
Indians.
or on horse, and he has churches for far west, the south
That
is
are
Key
still
West,
together.
St. Paul AME here in Jacksonville, St. Paul AME in Tampa, Florida, Apalachicola. There's another guy. What's his name? Sparta Jenkins.
Sparta Jenkins.
Right, his wife probably wrote "Way Upon the Swanee River," but someone else got credit for it. Right, so he was a slave. And then he saved all his money from tips at working at the Fuller Hotel, which is at the time the largest hotel not owned by William Flagler, right? This guy when old man Fuller dies, he owns a hotel that he couldn't go in the front door because of Jim Crow laws, right? He didn't care, because you know what he did? He goes, I'll work in the back door. I'll go ahead. He made all the money. He still got to own it. His wife was still doing tours from up and down the Swanee River. And they used all that money to build schools. His name was Sparta Jenkins, but nobody ever heard of him. But we want to talk about, always have the image of people being slaves.
Right.
Yeah.
And like Hollywood makes all the movies about, it's always slavery.
Yeah.
But no one talks about, you know what I'm saying, these guys that did these momentous things.
Yeah. So the one thing I will say that I like, and you know, because I know we got to wrap up, but one thing that I like, especially when it comes to Hollywood, even the young producer, Marseille.
Oh.
What's her name? I can't think of her full name. But anyway, she decided she didn't want to do any more. She doesn't want to produce any black trauma films.
Right.
Right?
Thank
Then
you.
recently I just watched Fatherhood with Kevin Hart, and it was executive produced by him and LeBron James. That was an amazing movie on Netflix, and it was all about fatherhood. And it was so amazing to me because it was no black drama, no, angry, black person this, and it was a feel good movie about a black father. You know what I mean? And the family, and his wife died, and his story of raising his daughter, right, on his own, but having the family with him. That we need more stuff like that, right? So we need more stuff like that, and I feel like there's a wave that's actually happening for that to happen, right? But here on a local level, right, what are some things that we can do to continue to get that history out there in the classroom, right, in the communities? What are some things that we can do on a local level, some resources that, some of the links that you were saying? What are some of those things that we can do?
So I like the idea what you said about you being a creative out in public. We could sit together with that and you can look at it and say, oh, I can use this when I do my show. The same with you, because what you guys could do is talk about, did you know that Billy Daniels from Jacksonville has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and that he was the first black to have a television show in the United States, and he was from Jacksonville? If you can throw a little fact out there like that, you could do that. This is one of his songs. He used to sing this song. You could do that. I mean, one of the
Even when it comes to the gospel, Ken Knight. I learned about.
Ken Knight.
I was blown away when I found out about Ken Knight and how important Ken Knight.
Ken
Knight.
He
used to bring like the biggest gospel names here.
Dr. Eugene White. Dr. Eugene White.
Ken Knight was the man.
Dr. Eugene and Dr. Eugene White and Ken Knight had a show they did together.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Jazz.
Yeah.
I did an exhibit on Dr. White.
At the same time I had my exhibit.
I did a you know how sharp he is, right?
Yeah, always.
Okay, so there's
Always.
a picture of him with his group, his quartet.
Quartet.
And it was a regular show they did on Wednesday night, and it was broadcast live from Ken Knight, and it was a live jazz thing trio. And then, man, you know, Doc was laying poles across the piano in his band, you know, and you know, there is, I don't know if he's still there, but one of his students works at Carnegie Hall. If he's still there, he was. When he was at, you know, Dr. Eugene White was the first choir director at White High School when it first opened. And the story behind that, you know, they tried to get rid of him, and he worked it out, but he, you know, he let them know he knew what they were doing. They said, well, we'll put you over to Ed White. And he was at Andrew Jackson, and then he was at Reebok. He was at some other schools I haven't missed, but he's been everywhere. And with those choirs, those high school choruses, he recorded albums.
I do know that.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and he performed at Carnegie Hall twice. But Doc, when he went into the army,
we used to walk by this man every day.
Oh, he was like, yeah.
We Clifford Buzz. That's us.
That's it.
Yeah.
Band.
That's
but
it.
like we walked by his office
They go to the
day.
band room every day.
And you ain't know.
Mr.
But
White,
listen,
yes,
and this the other
every
thing.
day.
But he can read and write classical music.
Right.
And he can tell you, oh, that's not right. You missed a note. So it's the classical and the pop and the jazz and the whatever.
And look who he played with.
languages.
Lionel Hampton,
Yeah.
Duke Ellington.
Yeah.
You
Lawrence
can't
Monroe.
name
Yeah.
Man, yo, come
No,
on.
no.
Eugene White
Well,
is an
okay,
institution.
I'll tell you something.
He is
I'll tell you.
bad. As Stephen A.
Talk-
Smith said, he a
talk to-
bad man.
Okay, talk to Lodge New Parsons and see what he says.
My
You know-
mind is
You don't know
blown.
Lodge New Parsons?
I do
Get
not.
Lodge New Parsons.
Yeah,
You don't know who Lodge New Parsons is?
Oh yeah,
I'm
Lonzo
finna-
Parker.
Most people even know there's a
Oh,
street named
what
Leontine
kind of-
Price.
What kind of
Tell 'em.
musician are you?
You know.
Oh my God!
What is it off of Norfolk, right?
What
Leontine
kind of
Price
yes,
Boulevard.
Yeah. What kind of? Oh.
You ever heard of her, Leontine
Okay,
Price?
I got it.
I love
One of
Leontine
the-
Price.
Leontine
Leontine
Price
Price was the
She is the bomb dick.
One of
Yes.
the foremost
Yes.
opera singers in
Ever.
the world.
The
Like
best.
when they talk about, they
They only talk about
Maria
Mary
Callas,
Anderson, but see,
and
they don't talk about Mary
Leontine
Anderson, but they
Price.
never
Yeah.
talk about
That's the holy
Leontine Price.
grail.
Leontine Price.
She's
is
from
one.
Mississippi.
Yeah.
You
but
need. There's a documentary on her. I'll
Yeah.
send it to you. But we need to talk because
Yeah, we need
you
to
don't
talk
know
about
about
that.
Leon.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh,
I didn't know about Dr. White. And
But here's what we need to do.
3 years.
Or
at
what you
Reebok.
said, right?
Yes.
We need to teach white people black history and take the taboo out of it.
We just need to
If
teach
you are
history.
if you are
Well-
black and you study and you're a professor and teach Roman history or you teach Greek history or Greek mythology, people go, wow, they're educated. But if someone teaches black history, like why would you study that?
Exactly.
Like I get a lot of that, right? Well, why would you have
But it's the foundation to the rest of that history.
right? So
Yeah.
my thing is
You
that
know?
we need to teach. Do you remember when they used to say, don't have the white politicians go to the black church and teach about oppression. Why don't you go to the white churches and teach them? We need to go to white students and teach them black history, and we need to teach black kids that everybody wasn't against them. We need to teach unifying history, the real history, because the world wants to separate folk. Because you got
It's not the world.
It's not
a
the world.
small
It's a
system.
small
That's
group
the
of
system,
people.
right?
Yeah.
It's
So
a
you
small
have
group of people. Yeah.
10% of the people own 90% of the wealth.
Yeah.
Then you have 90% of the people who are taught to hate each other, so we can't see the bigger piece of the pie. So you got 90% fighting over the 10%, while the 10% own the 90%. And until we liberate our minds and our consciousness, right, into and look at the world through a different lens that doesn't separate us, that brings us together, the system will always stay in place. The system plays on hatred. The system plays on prejudice.
effective way to control.
Right. It's the, how do you
Effective way to
control
control.
people
And-
by controlling their minds and controlling
And
their
see,
emotions.
And the big part of that is that you, and I've been saying this a lot for years, and I realize really how important that is you have to go into you and pull the junk out. Because if you live in this country, I don't care how proud black we all are right here, we've been hearing that since we've been here.
Yeah.
So we gotta go in here, and when that idea come up that somehow we're less than or we don't deserve having the nice house, whatever, we need to go ahead and pull that out because we've been hearing that. And so we've got to believe that, heck yeah, I'm supposed to have whatever the heck I want. And forget what you think about it, and I'm going to enjoy it. So everybody, if you live in this country, And if you looked at anything that came out of this country that portrayed black, white, and other ethnic groups in any kind of way but positive, you have got to go in and get the junk out of you so that you can do what
You have to go.
Jerry is talking about.
You have to go in and tap into your humanity.
You have to
Because
go
at the end of the day, you are a being having an experience, and at the end of the day, when you are gone, you leave whatever color this body is behind.
Exactly.
Yep.
There's a being inside of you
It's
that
a
is having an
being.
experience.
Right. And it's
whatever your
and it's
suit
being
is,
restricted. It's being restricted
Yeah.
because of what you have
because
not
of the
been-
construct.
Because
There's
the
a
construct, and we
construct
haven't.
that you've
A
been-
social
and we-
construct is
social
meant
construct.
based on division.
But
Yeah.
you know, you're not going to challenge the social construct until you deal with
Until you
this.
do
Until
it
you
within
deal with
yourself.
Because you're
Yeah.
not going to be strong enough
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
because that's a big construct. It's not that it can't be,
Yeah.
but that's a big,
I found myself.
deep-rooted issue.
I found myself becoming more equipped when I started going inside, and I'm
That's
like,
right.
I'm a being. This
You
is,
are- this
you know,
is
if we
it.
went into space, we would put on a spacesuit.
Right.
That's how we existed. If we went in the bottom of the ocean, we would put on some type of school. It would be a suit. So we are in a dimension that we have to wear the
With
suit
this,
in.
mhm.
Now, if you allow others to define that suit instead of you just understanding this is a
Exactly.
suit, if you allow others to define, I have developed better patience and relationship and temperament with white people. Like I don't want to slap them all no more.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't mind. Well, let me finish. I don't mind because I will have a conversation with you because you've been stuck in that suit you
Me
in
too.
your whole life that gives you a level of privilege that you don't even understand.
Saying that you
So
have
if you want to have a real conversation, we could talk about it. We could talk about some history, but I understand where you're coming from. It's the same way men have a type of privilege that we don't know that women try to tell us sometimes.
Mhm.
Like there's some stuff women go through that we never have to experience because we are men and because we live in a patriarchy. And most things, you know, even when you grew up in church, God is a he, God is a father.
right,
When
right.
you get married, you take my last name.
Right,
When you
right.
like, there's so many things that cater to men. When it comes when it comes to the system of racism, there's so many things that cater to white people that they are not aware of.
Right.
But if we want to have that conversation, if you want to go there, we can break this down from a historical point, from an economic point, we can break it down. So because I've gone in
Mhm.
and I understand that I'm a being within a suit, I'm able to deal with other people in their suit, unless your suit, you know, feels like it needs to do some harm to my
Then
suit.
it's right.
Then,
sorry.
you
Then
know,
we-
then we're having a different conversation.
Well,
But,
I
you
ain't
know,
gonna lie.
well, part of
Yeah.
that construct is just defining civilized. Okay,
Mhm.
so like the whole thing about black hair, right, is such a threat to people that aren't black, right? So like,
Why is that?
Even
though?
black people.
because people are taught what was civilized, so you have to
Gotcha.
dress this way to be
Mhm.
civilized.
Right.
And so what we've done was we've taken anybody that is not what's
What we consider
colonial,
colonial.
right?
Mhm.
When colonialism started, it started in Great Britain and it spread throughout the world. So this colonial idea defined what civilized and uncivilized was. Now, what I find, so the savages were the Native Americans, right? They're the first people in Americas that are defined as savages. But these people that were so-called savages kept them people through the first winter when they couldn't plant on Cape Cod or Plymouth, Massachusetts, right off Cape Cod, and they didn't understand how to grow crops in that sandy soil, and it was the Native Americans that taught them to use fish and put it underneath the seed to use it for fertilization so they could get through that first winter, but they're savages, right? And then we look at, so if you don't eat with a fork, you're a savage.
Right.
But Africa never went through the Dark Ages.
Nope.
So when you,
Now, you can even talk about the Moors that went over there from Africa. They helped them through the Dark Ages.
no, but let me make this point.
We
There
got
was
people that helped them
there
through the Dark
wasn't
Ages,
a
too.
Dark Ages
There's
in
never was
Africa.
a- never
right.
a dark-
So,
Yeah.
like me personally, if I had a choice between living in London in the 1500s or living in like Zimbabwe in 2000
Let's go-
AD, right?
Let's go to
I mean not
Zimbabwe.
2000 AD, like 1000 AD
Yeah,
or
2008
right?
is fine.
They were living lovely.
They were living
Right,
lovely.
you,
yeah.
I mean, you like all these lost civilizations, right?
Yeah.
Now we can have another conversation about the Moors because one of the things that we have to learn to understand, like that's that whole African unification thing, right? If you want to unify Africa, do it through economics with the African Union. I'm 100% for that. But everybody black is not a Moor, and every Moor is not African, right?
Definitely agree.
Because
Yeah.
there was a potpourri of people. So Hannibal, who was from Carthage, picked up armies along the way. He just didn't go by himself with the few people there's modern day Tunisia now and conquer Rome. What he did was they went through Spain. They got all the Spanish armies that hated Rome. Then they kept on going, and they got the more or less the French-speaking people on the lower Alps joined that collective, right? And then they got people from northern Italy that hated the Romans. So by the time they got through that, right, it was a collection, right? Hannibal was.
Roman.
They still teach him at West Point. He's one of the greatest generals in human history. But what he did was he unified. The Carthaginians were, they didn't go to Rome just to take over. They created a base, right? And it's been through human history of alignment, right? Egypt had kept on going to war with the Hittites, and it isn't until they make peace, right? And then they finally had peace in the Middle East, which back then there was no such thing as the Middle East. But that's a conversation for another day.
Oh yeah, that's in the Middle East.
Right, because the people of Africa did not look at the Middle East as a separate thing, right? We need to get over that. So when we talk about Sumerians, we talk about Hittites, we talk about, the Central Saharan people that existed before the Egyptians. That, a lot of the teachings and gods were brought forth from the Sahara and the Sumerians. So like everybody in history has borrowed something from somebody else.
Exactly.
And it's like, what was that thing I said? You ever seen a monkey wrench from the 1800s? And then you go to Lowe's now and see what they look like. There's an evolution, right? So I've seen it, and I said, okay, that wrench doesn't seem to fit, right? And then the next guy comes along and he adds his piece. He adds something to it. And then someone said, well, instead of using a wrench, we're going to use sockets, right? And through history, we have to look at how the development. So Africa was the base. There's no denying it, right? The civilization started in the Middle East and it was Middle East today and Africa. Back then it wasn't a separate thing, right? There's no getting around that. But every civilization has added a piece in building, right? Like the Romans used the arch. The arch comes from Egypt, but the Egyptians never really, it wasn't a part of all their building or architectural. They didn't use the arch, but the Romans took the arch to the next level, right? And then every civilization comes along and they create these things.
2.0. Yeah.
Right. 2.0, right.
Knowledge doesn't belong to anybody. It's, you know what I'm saying? We've got to stop owning knowledge. Knowledge is supposed to be passed. Like one of the great things in history, if you ever go down to Hubbard Street, right outside that, I think it's the Scottish Rite Cathedral.
Oh, yeah.
It shows Akhenaten passing the sacred knowledge to Pythagoras.
People don't even realize that.
Who ended up being recorded
And passed
by
by
Euclid.
I just passed by earlier today.
People don't pass.
So we gotta pass the knowledge, right? We definitely gotta pass the knowledge. And we gotta get creative, and we have to.
But we can't deny what it now.
Right.
On the other side of
deny,
it,
exactly.
we can't so-called white people got to stop denying where the history came from, right? We got to stop that too.
Yeah.
So, in other words, knowledge, peace, all that stuff. The Egyptians were all different complexions. Go to the hieroglyphs. Why would they paint some people yellow, some people brown, some people red, and some people black if everybody was Nubian? Why would they call them the Nubian kings if everybody was Nubian? We had different empires, different times, right? And we knew. Was Egypt in Africa? Absolutely. Was it started by people of the African continent? Absolutely. But it was also a mecca of learning. So Baghdad in 800 AD, before Islam became radicalized, right? All the number system we use is from Islam. Most of the stars in the sky are from Islam. Most of the medical techniques that were used, they ignored in the Dark Ages in Europe. They were doing eye surgery and heart surgery in Egypt. They were doing 1,000 years later in Baghdad during the Great. We don't teach that,
and it's not taught. But it is taught, but it's taught that one group of people.
That one people.
Yeah, right.
And I think that's why when it comes to how you saying knowledge is it's evolved. Not one person can't take credit. I think there's so much pride from black people on claiming the knowledge because the only knowledge you want us to claim is that we were slaves.
Right. Yeah.
And I agree.
So you see a lot of reclaiming of history with black people. Like, no, we created this. Y'all stole it. No, we created this. And I don't think it's out of hate. It's out of like, you just wanted me to believe
That I
that
did
you
nothing for
created
me.
me in America as
Right.
an African American
Right.
byproduct of
So
being a slave.
what we've done is we've taken the world from 1492 to 2021, and you can't take that lens that we have now on our worldview and put that on the ancients. Okay, that's not how the world existed in ancient times. But we also have to undo the damage of since 1492. When Columbus landed, it changed world history. He's the first. He's not even the first
But he
European
didn't land
to
in
discover
America.
He
He
wasn't
didn't
even
land
the
in
first-
America.
I mean, that's what gets me mad, right? That
He didn't
gets-
land in America.
Now listen, I'm part Sicilian, right? I do not claim Christopher Columbus. If I'm going to claim a
Why
famous
not?
Italian explorer, I'll explain Amerigo Vespucci, right? And one of the things he recorded was that there were dark-skinned people in Brazil.
Exactly.
In his letters,
Yeah.
right? I mean, the maps that Columbus used were used
Were
by
some
the Vino brothers.
and they
then
were
the
black.
Right.
They were black Spanish men. Yeah.
And then before that, Leif Erikson from the Vikings, like, there were maps of the Americas long before Christopher Columbus.
yeah.
But it's almost like, and it's almost like how we do the Bible. We pick and choose what we want to teach.
Yes.
And we always forget that there are people who are like her historians who are out there. There are people who are still around. It's not like a lot of this history is so far gone.
Right.
We're not talking about like generations and generations and generations. Like my mom is still very much knows segregation, right? Because she
Right.
grew up here.
Yeah.
She grew up in Jacksonville. She went to Douglas Anderson when Douglas Anderson was the only high school for black kids. You know what I mean? So all of that stuff, right? We in terms of talking about the undoing, we have to start at being willing, right, on both sides. We got to be willing to listen and to learn, and we also have to get to a point where we are just talking to each other, right? There's a lot of times where we don't even talk to each other.
You mean us as black people or people in America?
People in America.
I think we do. I think it's just so performative, especially when you got, you know, it's almost like Malcolm said, you know, just give me a white racist. I'm tired of the white liberals. Because at least
Right.
the white racists,
Yeah.
I know where you are.
Nah, I
the
said
white
it right,
liberal,
right.
you want to come and sit down and talk to me, and then you want to start a parade, but you want to lead the parade and still
Right.
want me to follow. You still want to put me in charge.
Yeah.
So I feel like we are having, because I live in Riverside. White people always want to talk about race, but it's very performative.
Right.
Mhm.
Because it's not like you really want to problem solve. You putting salve on your conscience.
Yeah.
I had a
Right.
conversation.
I got a
I
That's
talked to her.
right.
Yeah, I got a black friend now.
The
and I
number
wanna-
one,
yeah.
You know what's
that
even worse than
cried in
that?
front of
Yeah.
me
A
recently.
white apologist is the most
Man,
dangerous.
look.
Listen,
Yeah.
I
if
be
you
like,
don't
man,
like
come
you,
on.
I can't stand,
I can't stand it,
a
bro.
white
Yeah.
apologist. Like, did you see them people last year that put themselves in chains with kissing black people's feet and that begging for forgiveness?
Yeah.
I said that was the
All this
sorriest.
performative
Can I
stuff,
cuss
man.
one time?
Yeah.
That was the sorriest shit I've ever seen in my life. Right? I'm like, listen. I am a man. My father raised me up. I come from a real racial back. My family is all over the place, right? We got all kind of huge. Like when we have our family
We got the
picnics,
world
it's
of
the world of
nations.
nations, right?
We got-
But my dad, when I was a kid, coming up, said there ain't no man better than you, and you are not better than any other man. And that's always been my mindset, right? I've never been afraid to compete on the athletic field or with my brain and having a conversation. So I do not allow anybody to intimidate me. I'm here. If you beat me because you were better that day. We good.
Right.
But that's always been my mindset, and I grew up in an environment that was conducive to that. Right. I have a Scottish grandmother. She had the hardest brogue you've ever heard. Right. And she got Jamaican and mixed race grandkids, and she loved. And it, look, Nana was Nana to everybody. My grandmother would go downtown with her grandbabies of all her little complexions, right? And she didn't care. That's just who she was. You know what I'm saying? But so that's how I grew up. So I have been privileged in the fact that my worldview hasn't been tainted like a lot of other people have, right? And I've always felt like me and her have had this conversation before, until we open the doors to everybody. We got to take the taboo out of black history.
Yeah.
Like when people celebrate St. Patrick's Day, the slogan is everybody's Irish on St. Patrick's Day, right? And we've got to have that same on Juneteenth, Now let's get right back to it. When we celebrate Juneteenth, we gotta embrace the fact that there were Union soldiers that were white and black that fought for people to even have a Juneteenth. That General Granger had black and white soldiers that went to Galveston, Texas, right? So we've got to embrace, like when I went on Juneteenth, I went to City Cemetery and I was cleaning tombstones of Civil War soldiers. That's what I did Saturday morning. That's what I did because that's what I felt I need. That's how I needed to celebrate. I wanted to go see Tillman Valentine. I put flags. I put white stones on his thing. I hooked his grave up. I went to go see Joseph E. Lee. I went to go see Eartha White. I went to go see all the Civil War soldiers because that's what Juneteenth, in my opinion, is about. The people that sacrificed for that war. And so we got to get to a point where we can have people that don't look like the same celebrate the same holiday and embrace it.
Let me ask you a question though. How long? Because I understand we're just cogs in the machine.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of stuff we want to see that we're going to be long off the scene when it happens.
If it wasn't the truth, why is people so hard pressed to oppress the truth?
Because,
why is they shutting down the 1692 project? Why are they shutting down? There's not one school district in the entire country that has adopted critical race theory. In Texas and Florida and all these other states have already adopted. They've already signed law that you can't teach it.
You know why? So I'm saying, how many generations? Because while these generations are very expressive, they're non-binary. They're I don't care. I felt like wearing this today. I ain't got to explain it to you. I'm asking you this. Yeah, I'm challenging you, Mom. Why is that the way you think? So we have a generation that basically gives zero F's about anything, which would be the perfect generation to get this information. But how many generations do you think? Because I love the way you think, but I'm thinking realistically. Idealistically, what you're saying is completely right. It's humanity, what you're saying. Based on the reality, because I don't dislike white people. I dislike a racist system. I dislike a racist white supremacy system. I don't dislike white people. So I'm saying
exposure.
So I mean, give me, and I think about this all the time because I feel like I'm not going to see what I want to see.
It's changing
in my
before
lifetime.
our eyes. We just have to allow us. How about Ferguson a couple years ago?
Mm-hmm.
How about all them? Was it Ferguson? All them white women stood in front of the
Oh,
black
yeah.
protesters,
Right.
and they formed a line between the police and the
That
protesters.
was not performative. That was
No.
humanity.
Oh
Correct.
yeah,
That was
like,
That was John
humanity.
Brown. That
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
that was
Right.
listen. That's
And
the
then the
legacy of John Brown.
ones that were in the courthouse, and the black guy was on the table,
Right.
and they formed a circle around
yeah.
him. Yeah.
Humanity.
So I think what
The only
happened-
racial thing I'll say is this: black people protest for human rights. They protest for civil rights, and they try to protect themselves from a system. White people protest when they're inconvenienced. And
I don't want to wear this mask. It's
Right,
not
right.
Storm the Capitol.
let me tell you, I have a, I don't know if he's listening, right? But I got this one white friend, right? And he always says to me, "Man, we got to do something." I said, "What?" He goes, "We're under attack. The white male is under attack."
Right.
And I said, "Dude," I said, "have you ever had your ass you don't get your ass beat on a regular, right? You usually get the benefit of the doubt. Now, there's some cops that go off on white, of course they do. But for what you see on TV, a lot of that is real, okay? So you have a job at a Fortune 500 company. You're an executive vice president, and you mad because some sister got the job over you, right? And I'm like, dude, you're still making like $250,000 a year. You have over $1 million worth of property, and nobody's gonna take your shit. And I'm like, how you want? I don't feel
But
like.
you know what that is.
But is
though.
that
white
mentality?
man-
That's the right.
But
That's
you know
the,
what
yep.
it is, right? It's
That's
the
the
fear
fear.
of the karma.
The karma.
Because
Yep.
you know what you've done.
Done.
Yep.
So now
You
you're
know
like,
it's true.
when is the bomb
Gonna
going to
break-
hit?
yeah,
So
that's
when
But
is
it's
it
not,
coming
it's
back
not only
on me?
fear of the karma, it's the fear of the karma, but it's also the fear of, like, who does this black woman think she is? Who does she think that she is, that she can be above me or be, or, but it's like that when it comes to when Malcolm X said that the black woman is the most unprotected. It is,
He was
it
right.
is
It's
a
true.
fact
It's
because even black men feel intimidated and threatened by a black woman, right?
on, love.
So we gotta listen. I
Speak
know
on it.
we can.
Y'all better get yourself
we
together,
get
cause
because we know
Yeah.
that one thing.
Come on.
One thing I know for a fact is that black women, we out here shining, and we are, no matter how under attack we are, we still shining.
And we
Right.
protect
I'm-
you.
And some of y'all do.
some
You do.
Come on, man.
He does.
Come on.
Not all.
My brother
He does.
does.
You know what I'm saying? Not
He does.
everybody.
Not
And it's
everybody.
like, but the thing about it is, we need more of that
Yeah.
because I don't feel protected. I promise you, and this is just like my own truth.
Hmm.
If I'm somewhere outside of a place, if I'm somewhere by myself, and I saw one of the three of y'all there, I would feel okay. I would feel safe. If it was somebody else,
I don't know.
and I'm talking about some people that we
And I
know,
understand.
I would not feel safe.
And
We
I
gotta
understand.
end Jim
At all.
Crow.
I would not
living-
feel
We are
safe at
still
all.
living
I
in
understand.
Jim
Well,
Crow.
that's what I was talking about.
And-
Right.
That's what I was talking about. You have to go in yourself. You have to accept you understand that this system is wrong, and I have allowed some of that to get into me, and I
Yes.
make decisions
That
based on
inferiority.
because even
Yes.
for us, the Jim Crow, we know, okay, I ain't supposed to go over there because I'm black. I can't go over there. Well, now I gotta change that mindset.
Why?
Because all of us have that feeling. We get that feeling when we know white people looking at us kind of funny. We know what
We
that's
do.
like.
I'm different.
And
But-
no, but we've experienced
Oh, I'm different too.
it.
I got
Early-
that shit.
early in life, I
Yeah,
did.
that's
I'm
what I'm
with you.
saying.
I'm
That's
with
That
what I'm saying.
Shakari, we
But you
gonna
made a
go to
decision,
Shakari
though.
Richardson energy from here on
Yeah,
out.
but you
That's
made
it.
a decision though. You
Yeah.
like,
Y'all see
I'm not
Shakari
doing it.
Richardson?
But do you know
Black
why?
woman that just won the
Oh,
the
yeah,
race.
yeah, yeah,
Ooh,
yeah.
is that the
Yeah.
runner?
Yes, that's why
When
I
I
say
tell you I
Shakari
love her,
Richardson
Yeah.
energy.
With them
That's the
nails in
energy
her
we
hair,
need.
she's
I love
like,
it.
what?
That's
What?
like FloJo
I don't
all over
care.
again.
Yeah,
I
FloJo,
love it.
yeah.
Man.
Why?
And
We
why
gotta go
the-
back to why. Why was Jim Crow established? Them when Lincoln, when they were doing the Emancipation Proclamation, right, and these generals were coming through the South, like on May 20th, 1865, when Florida was declared emancipated, right? These slave owners knew in their heart these people were going to come back to the plantation, right? They just knew they weren't going to be able to make it, right? And then all of a sudden, you have all these black farmers throughout the South turning up, right? I mean, millionaires. There was
There were millionaires or
Yeah.
business millionaires.
by today's
No sports.
standards, right?
Yep.
There
No
was
sports.
millionaires,
And
right?
then they did the
So-
same thing like they did with Tulsa. They took
Yeah,
it. They
they
took
took
it
it
away.
So now, there's two things that happened. The black family unit was intact when the end of slavery, right? So you look at all these figures that her and I had presented, right? 150, all of them that were former slaves
of them
was their
married.
wives, their
The wife
children,
was there with
and
them.
it was a family
Is
farm, right?
Mhm.
Or it was a family
Yeah.
law practice, or it was a family anything, right?
Mhm.
And it was always the nucleus was there, right? And it wasn't black women during Reconstruction were not subservient; they were a partner, right?
They were-
If
they
you
were
think of some of the
independent.
greatest
Yeah.
African Americans during that period, right? So Abraham Grant, his wife was Florida Grant, went everywhere she went, right? Even though he was the bishop and she was, quote unquote, the bishop's wife or the first lady, right? Everybody wanted to know what she was wearing. Everybody wanted to hear her talk. Everybody wanted, because she was something to be admired, right? Pan-Africanism started right here in Jacksonville, Florida, way before Marcus Garvey. Dr. Love and his wife were living right here in Jacksonville, Florida, and him and Henry McNeil Turner, they start the Pan-African movement, right? He's considered Dr. Joseph Robert Love is considered the father of Pan-Africanism. When he goes to Jamaica and he writes all these papers, I think his first book was called Romanism is Not Christianity, right? And, he writes a paper. That was his first.
He went right in.
He went right in. Right. He was a Christian.
And he went right in.
But what he was able to do was, he was preaching black excellence. He was preaching, black entrepreneurship. Look at Clara White, how there were so many people at the end of slavery, all the elderly were left to the side, right? So they had no use to anybody. And then these people were using their wealth. It all stayed within the community. People were looking out for each other. And that was the base. So how did you destroy the black community? break up the family unit, right?
Yeah.
Make the wife subservient to the husband, remove the father from the home.
Treat your women like we treat our
The
women.
three
Exactly.
things, the three things that they did to liberate the slaves from their newfound success. I can only speak for Jacksonville more than any place else because I'm a Jacksonville historian. But the first thing they did, drugs, alcohol, and gambling, prostitution, right? Those were the four things that they used down on Houston Street and some of the places in the Villa, right? There was an opioid epidemic during in the 1870s here in Jacksonville, Florida, right? It was called laudanum back then. You could buy it for a nickel. It was cough syrup. But there was an epidemic, right? So you divide people from alcohol, drugs, and all these other things to divide people from their money. Then you had people like Ada Braddock, James Weldon Johnson's dad, were the consciousness of Jacksonville, preaching to stay off of that stuff. William Motrell Middleton, one of the first principals of Stanton High School, they were teaching to stay off of this stuff back then, to keep the family and unit intact back then. And these are the people that we need to uplift. What how did Frederick Douglass, all these guys know, Abraham Grant and William Motrell Middleton, James Johnson knew what they were going to do to destroy the black community. They were preaching it back then. Yeah. They knew what was going to come down the road because these people were so successful early on. So what do you have to do? Divide them amongst themselves.
So that's why we gotta continue, and I wish we could continue this conversation. But we gonna be here all night.
That was a long
Yeah,
30 minutes.
We gonna be
I'm
here.
sorry.
No. Listen, this was great because
But
I feel
told
like
you 30
I
minutes.
feel like this was necessary. I really
Right.
feel like it was necessary, and I really.
Maybe a part 2, part 3.
Oh Lord. Well,
Yeah, we definitely need to do that. And I think we also need to get creative. Like I really do want to talk
So
about
we'll talk about,
how
yeah.
we can get creative and talk. You know, because I like talking about it, but I'm also about moving. Like I want to do. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like I want to like let's go. Like I'm amped.
Yeah.
I'm hyped now. Like I feel like that little boy. Like
Yeah.
I'm like.
Let me
But
leave
We was
you.
born this
and the going back with the children, I've had several occasions where when black kids come in and white ones, but really, the folk, black, they come in and they ain't trying to come to no museum, whatever.
Right.
They ain't got what? But then when they come in, and anybody who knows me and who's ever had a tour by me or see me give a tour, I don't play about you coming here act crazy over here. This holy ground, you ain't coming here with that. Oh, I have been. I can have my coworkers will tell you. They already tell me what.
Like somebody auntie.
Oh yeah, that's it. One time they said, "Girl, you put your hand on your hip and you drop your hip."
Oh, I can already see.
And you was doing this. You better get it together. You're not going in here with that. This holy ground you going into. You ain't going in here act like that. And see, when I make it, you understand this is important. They be like, she crazy. You gonna be like, what's wrong with her? But when they go in there. So first of all, this is all black people in here. It was one little boy. He kept saying, ain't nothing but black people in here. I said, it's an African American museum. Throughout the whole tour, he kept saying, ain't nothing but black people in here. And he got louder every time he said it.
Yeah.
And I said, it's an African American museum. And so at one point when he said, I said, guess what, sugar? This is only 1% of what you need to know. I said, it's more.
It's
you
more
need
than
to
that.
know. And he was just like, wow. He was like, man, like that. And we happened to have an African exhibit up. Oh my God.
Yeah.
When I was throwing those kids, and one group came and they were from Reigns High School. Boy, they cut up so bad. Baby, I was street slanging, whatever. If you don't get that, man.
Did you cuss at them?
No, I didn't. But by the time I told them off, they knew. And when they understood that when we go in here, you go act right. They were like, yes, ma'am, I understand. Then I went, good morning, my name is Miss Toller, and I want to welcome you to the room. They went, this lady crazy. Like
some of them, that's the only way they
tell
understand.
you, when we at the end, and we had the African exhibit, at the end, those kids did not want to leave that museum.
Yeah.
They were like, wait a minute.
Kids
You
want-
was like,
kids wanna learn.
They wanna
They
learn,
knew. And that's the other thing, with the pants hanging down and all that stuff. Every last boy was holding their pants up like that. I had said nothing to them about your pants hanging down there. And they was like, wait. I said, okay, it's time for y'all to go. And they was like, no, we ain't got to go. I said, well, y'all, because they were actually going to take them to Edward Waters College afterwards. They said, no, we ain't got to go and do we teach. Can we stay? Go.
Yeah.
We want to stay here. And they was asking all these questions. And I said, y'all got to go do something. They were like, oh, no, hold on. We can eat later. And we can eat later. I said, what? I was like, look, y'all got to go.
These kids
And
are
they
They do
were-
want to learn.
when
Yeah.
because when they came in, they were so loud and rowdy. Like everybody in the staff was like, "What is going on up there?" When they left, they were like, and Carol Alexander was still there, and she was there that day. She was like, "What did you do to them kids?" She said they were when they left, they were still like, it was a different sound that they had. And it wasn't like that. And they were like, oh, hey, dog. Oh, man, when you get back, I need to get a copy of it when we get back to school. You wrote that down? Oh, good, dog. I'm going to get that. Don't lose it now, because when we get back to school, I'm going to get a copy. And she was like, what do you do to this kid? I said, all I told them they need to listen. And I just shared with them who they were.
And you told them the
And
history.
they were just, it was just the flip. And this is what I got with them about Reigns. I said, I know, this is how I fussed at them. I said, I know darn well. Y'all not acting like that coming from William M. Reigns. Do y'all know who that man was? I said, I'm mad for him. I said, don't you ever tell nobody you will go to William Marion Reigns acting like that. That black man fought hard so you could be fully educated, and you coming out the street representing him like that? Don't you ever. I said, I'll fight you myself. I was talking to him just like that. And I did. And I said, man, that man went through a lot so black children could be educated. And here you are acting like that, man. Don't you ever tell nobody that you come from Reigns.
We got that a lot growing up. These kids don't get it.
They
And
don't
it shows
get it.
love.
Right.
It
But
shows
I'm
love,
telling, and
so.
their whole demeanor changed.
Yeah.
And then the whole place is black, and then there's this black woman standing before you. She sounds like she know what she's talking about.
So we
And-
gotta do
Right. Yeah.
more of that, because the bottom line is the kids, the youth, they want to learn, right?
They
And there's a wealth of knowledge right here in Jacksonville. There's all kinds of history here in Jacksonville, and we got to do better.
Yeah.
As a black community in Jacksonville, we got to do better. We got to stick together better. So I've enjoyed this conversation.
Thank
I'm gonna leave with
This
this
has
final
been-
thought.
Yeah.
The only way we're gonna defeat ignorance is through intellectual pollination. And the bee has always represented two things: industry and pollination, right? Which is, the bee is the secret of life, right? So the bee pollinates everything, so things will grow and so forth, right? When you go to Tutankhamun's tomb, what did they find? Herbs from all around the world. When you look at the Etruscans in the Etruscan Empire, which predates the Roman Empire, right? You find elements from Africa in the Etruscan lexicon, right? In their way of life. So what we have to do is take the fear out of knowledge. If things don't look like you, doesn't mean it's a taboo. It's okay to express ourselves culturally. There should be cultural pride. We should have pride in our nationalities or creeds and all that. But at the same time, it should be a welcome thing that we can embrace each other through culture.
I agree completely. Man, so thank y'all so much for tuning in. I feel like rejuvenated and all of that after this conversation.
I know,
So we
I was
definitely
ready to
gotta
go sleep when we got started. I'm gonna have to settle down. It's 11 o'clock. I'm gonna have to.
Hey, you turned.
right.
turned
It's
up.
all the
I'm
way
turned
turned.
I'm turned up.
Donica is all the way turned.
And I'm gonna say this, and people who know me know, this is my blessed gift. I am so blessed to be in a position to do this. It's more than just history for me. And it's something I knew I wanted to do since I was a little girl. And I remember the moment that it hit me that this is what I want to do. And I'm doing it. And most people, they don't love what they do. They don't get up and they be like, oh, I had to go in here. And even when I'm tired, just like when I was a little tired because it was the end of the day, I'm hyped now. When I get home, I'm going to have to settle down.
It's like I'm ready to
I'm
you're gonna have to
ready.
get you some of that listen, today's show was also brought to you. Not only was it brought to you by Uncut Drip by Chris Pratchett, so y'all make sure y'all check out Uncut Drip, Unsilenced, right? Y'all make sure y'all hit him up. It was also, my cup is empty. It was also brought to you by the Professor's Tea, which had matcha root and turkey.
Maca root.
It had maca root. It had turkey drumsticks. Lemongrass, lemon pepper.
You got it all wrong.
Oh man.
Ashwagandha root. It had Sarah seed tea. Off somebody fence.
Don't worry
you
about
got them people thinking. You got them thinking now we really had brown liquor in there. You done messed us up. Look at you. They think we had.
I'm stopped at the turkey drumstick.
I know. What is a turkey
How do you
drumstick?
drink the turkey drumstick?
Turkey mushroom stick.
Ain't no sticks.
Turkey mushrooms.
I don't think that was brown liquor.
It had wait. It had ashwagandha, turkey mushrooms,
Reishi mushroom.
reishi mushroom,
Maca root.
reishi mushrooms,
and maca root.
maca root, and lemongrass,
No lemongrass.
and hibiscus,
No hibiscus.
and some hemp seed.
And no
Go ahead,
brown
see.
liquor, because I know that's what y'all think now. Because the way she acted,
Y'all drinking the herb. Y'all gave her a Mad Dog 20.
yeah, she must have had Mad Dog or her. Something messing her cup.
Hey, thank y'all so much for
Thank
tuning
y'all.
in to another edition of the Random Thoughts of Rain podcast. Once again, shouts out to the whole MPN network. We hope y'all enjoyed
To the
another
top.
amazing MPN night. And we are, led by our fearless leader, Mr. Al P.
Mr. Al P. Woo,
Woo,
woo.
woo. To the top, Evelyn Flo. How come you don't say Evelyn Flo no more?
That's what I'm rapping.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Evelyn Flo to the top. Yep. All right, y'all. I love y'all.
All right.
Make sure y'all continue to tune into the Random Thoughts of Rain podcast. www.IamLoveReigns.live. Follow me on all the social media stalking apps at I Am Love Reigns. Peace. Thank y'all so much. I appreciate y'all.